everybody. Thank you for joining us today. For those of you that I haven't met before or you don't know me, my name is James Osborne. I'm a non-exec director and advisor to the recruitment sector and co-founder of the Recruitment Network. We are doing a LinkedIn Live today on umbrella reform, the JSL, Chapter 11, looking at risk, responsibility and opportunity as well. Those of you who know me, I like to focus on the opportunistic options and things that are coming out of the changes that we face as well. I've got a great panel with us today. We'll have about half an hour, 45 minutes or so to chat through some of these changes, what's going on and what you need to do about it. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or in the Q&A. We'll get those answered. And for those of you listening back to the recorded version of this, obviously, if you've got any questions retrospectively for either myself or any of the panel, feel free to get those across to us and we'll get those out. I'll put a bit of a backdrop to sort of what we're talking about today. I think reality is 2026 is changing up to be one of the most extraordinary years for a whole host of reasons. I'm not even talking about Donald Trump at this point, but looking at some of the massive legislation changes that we're facing. It feels to me, I've been in the industry for 28 years, it feels like every year there's a whole lot of new stuff being thrown at recruitment companies and recruiters. So we spend more time trying to navigate the changes that are being thrown at us rather than just getting on with our day job. So luckily we have partners to help us with that. But the reality is these changes in umbrella reform, the JSL, the joint and several liability, the Chapter 11 developments, and don't get scared by that. I think some people get quite nervous when you talk about Chapter 11. And some of these changes are going through the Employment Rights Act, and they're really reshaping how we do business, how recruitment companies work, those supply chains, how they operate, and so on and so forth. And like any change, it creates a certain amount of risk and challenge, but it also creates a huge amount of opportunity as well, which I think is really exciting. And again, I want to make sure we're talking as much today about the opportunities we are talking and the commercial opportunities we are talking about, this sort of strategic risk. I suppose I'm not an expert in this, so I'm going to make that really fundamentally clear. Luckily, I've got some friends who are experts. So if I just quickly introduce our panel today, no particular order, I'm just going to go around my group. We've got Dave Johnson, who's the head of legal from PayStream. We've got Cam Jitlar, who's the managing director of Cinch. Colin Gunnell, who's the CEO of Liquid Friday, and Andrew Chamberlain, who's the head of strategic policy and advocacy for the FCSA. So, gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Apologies, everyone, but we haven't gone hugely diverse with our panel today, but we just chose the people that we know are brilliant at what they do, and they're the first ones who came to mind. So there's no particular angst there at all. So just want to get this going. And I think, as I said before, I don't think this necessarily is talking about the issues and the challenges as much as it is talking about the opportunities as well. So I'm going to open this up to anyone on the panel just to sort of kick us off, I suppose, and just to get your sense of, does someone want to, on the panel, just explain to people who may be a bit unfamiliar with all the stuff that's going on or has been going on, what all these things mean? What does all this stuff mean, the JSL, et cetera, et cetera? And I'll pick on anyone on the call just who wants to pick that up to start with, and unmute yourself and let us go.
I don't mind giving it a go, and then others can correct me as they see fit, James, if that's okay.
Fantastic, thanks, Andy.
So joint and several liability. So Chapter 11 of this is the technical bit of the Income Tax Earnings and Pensions Act is new legislation. It is now legislation. The Finance Bill just received royal assent, so it's now the Finance Act. So it's there, it's happening, and it will be in effect from the 6th of April. And what Chapter 11 does is it says that if there's any unpaid tax by a umbrella company or a purported umbrella company, if HMRC is missing tax, then the liability for that will go up the supply chain to the relevant parties. And the relevant parties, I'll talk about in a second, will have joint and several liability. So who are the relevant parties? Well, it will be the umbrella that should have paid the tax in the first place, and then the agency that contracts or it could be an MSP that contracts directly with the end client, so the top agency or the MSP in that chain. And if the umbrella has disappeared, for example, then the MSP or the agency will be the relevant party and will have that liability. That's in a nutshell what JSL is and what it does.
Fantastic, thanks, Andy. And Dave, just to bring this to you, so where do you think agencies are exposed then? I mean, maybe where they're not really realising that they're exposed in this process?
Yeah, I think, well, for the first time legally, certainly in terms of this new Chapter 11, agencies have this exposure to tax liability. And, as we know, unfortunately, we've had some rogue umbrella operators in the market for some time. HMRC and DBT have recognised that. That's what gave birth to Chapter 11 and joint and several liability, and that's the corner of the market that we need to eradicate. But thankfully, there's a good few stable umbrella providers in the market that agencies have been partnering with for years now. That do process things properly. They manage that employment risk for the agency, and those providers are there and have been all along. So, but it's important. We've been talking about it for a while now that agencies are partnering with those companies, and if there is any schemes that have been in part of supply chains up until this point, it's really important that agencies are analysing their supply chains and moving those out, because otherwise you are exposing yourself to potentially quite hefty financial liabilities.
And Dave, how do people know who are the right people to be working with?
For me, I would be looking at the providers that have been in the market for a long time. Those that have been operating 10, 15, 20 years. There's a reason that they're long-standing. Some of the it's not to say that some of the newer umbrella companies might not be compliant or legitimate, but I think the ones that have been in the market for a long time, clearly they are doing things correctly. They are doing things right. HMRC, for example, they have a name and shame list. That's a very quick way that an agency can go and have a look at some of those, providers that we're talking about. That's on the internet, and that's updated on a monthly basis. So that would be a good starting point.
Okay, fantastic. Colin, if I can bring you into the conversations now. So, where are you seeing agencies actually getting caught out at the moment? What are they doing or not doing where they're actually sort of getting bitten a little bit?
I think it can come in a couple of areas. I think part of it is the size of the task, kind of historically. I think some agencies that have potentially not had a kind of formal PSL, or have had a very wide-reaching kind of PSL, by definition takes a lot more effort and energy to run through kind of procedures and due diligence. I think there are some sometimes historically agencies have been put under quite a lot of candidate pressure to use certain organizations for personal gain by the candidate. That has not been kind of an optimum compliance approach for an agency to follow. And I think kind of moving forward, a big part of this in this kind of mitigation is there's absolutely kind of, and I echo Dave's thoughts completely, actually, due diligence on the entity, if that's actually kind of providing the umbrella services, but also kind of access to data. Data is really the core way of being able to kind of confirm and validate that everything's actually being done in a de-risked way. Right. So kind of focusing on those kind of organizations that are quite happy to be completely transparent, not just from, payslip audits and things like that, but organizations that are willing to, open up the front door of their businesses and say, you can look at everything that we're kind of sending to HMRC, to how things are being run and operating, to our systems and our processes. So there is that constant kind of validation. And there are lots of tools and systems out there that can make that easier for people. Yeah. But I think it's just, but we're certainly moving into a world where the format of kind of fire and forget, or maybe annual or biannual due diligence on your supply chain, just needs to be tightened more. Right. And constant flows of data is a really efficient way of doing that.
Okay, fantastic. There's no sort of stamp of approval anywhere that basically says the supply chain are approved and tick, 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 or do we actually, is it our responsibilities to do our own due diligence?
I think it's always going to come down to an agency's responsibility to do their own kind of due diligence. I think there are things that can help that process, and I think that things that can make that easier. So there are obviously accreditations that are out there. That's a really good idea. Sorry if we've got some duplication going on the line.
Andy, can you mute yourself, Andy, please?
Sorry.
Thanks. Sorry, Karen, go on.
And I think there are some things out there that can certainly make it easier.
Okay.
So we all know the accreditations that are out there: Professional Passport, FCSA. There are systems such as Veripay and SaferRec, and these are really good benchline indicators that this is a good organization that is willing to put itself and is comfortable putting itself through quite a rigorous audit process on an ongoing basis to make sure that everything is correct. I'm a really bit of a geek, so I'm a big advocate for data, and what data that you can get access to is a really good thing to be able to receive that constant ongoing stream of verification and validation that everything's going okay, and also having some a bit of a knowledge base or a training base inside the agency itself to actually be able to very efficiently understand and acknowledge what the data is that they are being provided with.
Right,
so
fine.
I don't think there's a single stamp that you can put on that says, listen guys, if you've got this, don't worry about anything at all. But I think it is about those building blocks of protection and those building blocks of due diligence to make sure that there is a robust process that isn't just underpinned and all of that risk mitigation is just concentrated in one area.
Okay. Cam, if I can bring you into this then. So if we look at it from a practical point of view, what does this actually change on a day-to-day basis for a recruitment company?
Well, I think the new legislation that's come in, it's not just, as you said, James, every year we see new things that come in. It's not just a change of legislation, it's a shift in accountability and shifting that accountability now onto the agencies. So like Colin mentioned, it's important to make sure that they're using umbrella companies that have been in the industry for a while, potentially have badges and pay slip checking services. But it's also about making sure that you understand the supply chain, you've got full transparency with the umbrella companies that you're working with. So I think it's really important to make sure that you work closely with them. There's with JSL, there's different reasons why an umbrella company may go down. And I think by working with people like the FCSA and SafeRec, etc., does help. But what's vital is to ensure that the agencies now have a robust due diligence process where they can look at umbrella companies closer to ensure that they understand the pay model that's being used, that they understand the processes that are in place. And that way they can ensure that they can mitigate some of the risk. There's other things in the industry, such as, some payroll companies provide credit facilities. It's important to understand that. Look at your payroll company. Do they provide credit? Do they have enough money to cover that credit? Is it credit insured? So small things within their due diligence, it's important to make sure that they make those changes so they can robustly look at those umbrella companies.
And do you think this is a bit of a tipping point here with how the old umbrella model has worked in the past, and is it just not fit for purpose anymore? And are we going to see more changes coming in off the back of this?
No, I think in terms of the models are there. The compliant models are there. I think we need to think about why has JSL come into force? HMRC have been trying to stamp out uncompliant models and uncompliant companies for a few years now. And I think they've come to the understanding that the majority of agencies that engage with an uncompliant company or uncompliant model, they know they're engaging with those uncompliant models. So by shifting any liabilities due to HMRC onto the agency, it should then stamp out those models. To be honest, I've been in the industry for 15, 20 years now, and I'm absolutely over the moon with JSL. And I'm hoping that going forward, it will stamp out the bad models, stamp out the bad companies, and create a more even playing field for both umbrella companies and agencies alike.
Okay, fantastic. Dave, if I come back to you for a second, is this outside of the risk that we've got to manage as an agency, does this create a commercial competitive advantage for agencies in any way? And what does that look like in your world?
I really do think so. I think because of the accountability now shifting, upstream in the supply chain, I think all parties in those supply chains are becoming increasingly aware of these risks, because there was a time when end clients weren't particularly bothered which agencies which umbrella companies that agencies were partnering with, but we're starting to see, especially on the public sector side, some of those larger end clients are starting to pay attention to that now, and it is increasing transparency throughout the supply chain. And I think if it was me as an agency right now, it's a massive opportunity to be able to showcase and demonstrate to your clients, how much care and attention and you're now paying to the supply chain and how you can protect them from this exposure moving forward. So yeah, I think it's a huge opportunity, and something I'm seeing when I'm speaking to agencies every day is that, because we always used to be, umbrellas are at the bottom of the supply chain, and there wasn't always a lot of free communication between the agency and the umbrella. It's quite difficult to get sort of information that we might need sometimes. What I'm really starting to see now is agencies are increasingly seeing umbrellas as partners, and are more willing to sort of engage and work together. So in that respect, it's kind of bringing everyone together, and kind of developing and fostering those relationships, which is really positive.
So Cam, do you think this is a chance for agencies to go to market and use this as an opportunity to go and build better relationships with their end user market?
Absolutely. I think that a lot of end clients are aware of the JSL changes. I think a lot of end clients are dictating to agencies, they have to have a badge or they have to have some sort of accreditation. Now, I think as an agency, when you're sitting in front of a new end client and the conversation you're having is that I understand my supply chain, I'm in control of my supply chain, and I can provide evidence of my supply chain, I think it puts you into a really good position when it comes to negotiating new business with end clients. And as I mentioned before, I think as time goes by, the playing field should level out. I've been in the industry for a while now, and some of the conversations I've had with agencies, some of the questions they ask me: do I have to pay the ENI? Do I get a referral fee? Do I get a % of the payroll back? These guys are using uncompliant models, which makes my life hard. And then from the agency's point of view, when you're speaking to an end client and the end client are offering you pay rates that are just not competitive, it's because they're using an uncompliant model. So hopefully the uncompliance will leave the market and agencies can go chest out to end clients and say, here's my supply chain, this is what we're doing, and here's the evidence behind it. You're safe with us.
Very good. Chest out. I love that. I'm going to use that expression again, which is great. And Andy, the expectations though from the end users, from the clients, is that going to now change as well then? So what they expect from a recruiter, is that going to look different moving forward too?
I think so. So actually, if there's an agency and an umbrella in the chain, then the end client doesn't have a liability under JSL. Sometimes end clients will contract directly with an umbrella company or with an agency that has its own payroll, and then the end client does have a liability. So end clients are going to, even where they have more complex supply chains, that they will be a bit protected. They're going to start to learn about this from different supply chains that they have. And it feels like culturally, we're moving into a world where it's no longer okay if you're a big company just to sort of say, well, I don't know, we paid an agency, they've paid someone. If there's a problem, it's not our problem. It's culturally changing so that supply chains, I sort of agree with pretty much everything that Cam has said so far in this call, by the way, that supply chains are going to talk to each other more, which is a good thing, that the really obvious non-compliant bad operators are hopefully going to be pushed out of this market. That is the one really good thing about Chapter 11. That's why we at the FCSA have broadly welcomed it, because we've been saying for ages we've got to do something to get rid of these non-compliant operators. Our members who are compliant are having to compete against them, and it's making life difficult. So if we can get rid of them, and we hope, like Cam does, that actually this will be very effective in doing that, because now it's relatively easy, actually, I think, for agencies to spot when they've got a non-compliant operator there. Do a bit of due diligence, you'll find out pretty quickly, and relatively easy to spot those that are doing things properly. But just as Colin said, it's about that ongoing due diligence. And, FCSA, we accredit umbrella companies, and that's great. But the JSL risk does go a bit beyond that, actually. And so it's that ongoing due diligence, and good umbrella companies will help agencies do that due diligence. They will share information with them. They will give them that data that Colin was talking about. They'll share their management accounts. They'll provide written information to say there's no loan schemes going on here, that everything's onshore. They'll provide written confirmation that tax has been paid to HMRC on the 22nd of each month when it should be paid. That ongoing thing is going to help you to mitigate the JSL risk.
Okay, fantastic. And Colin, obviously at Liquid Friday, you guys work across a lot of organisations and recruitment businesses. Are agencies now getting on top of this and changing and flexing and doing things differently? Or are you basically seeing people still go, not quite sure, we'll just let it blow over or whatever type thing?
Being brutally honest,
Please be brutal.
yeah, being brutally honest, kind of like no. I think there was more delay pain in changes like IR35, but we're seeing an awful lot of agencies and supply chains really taking it like a head start on this.
Okay.
I think there's always going to be practical and logistical pressure if the result of a agency strategy around this is actually we're going to be doing this moving forward, or actually we're going to make this easier to manage. So we're going to be working with fewer suppliers. If there's ever a candidate movement, that obviously always causes some pain. Nobody likes change, right?
Yeah.
So there's always some kind of pressure in there. But yeah, I don't want to turn it into a bit of a loving where everyone's just kind of agreeing with each other on the call, but there's some really cool stuff that's being kind of discussed here about the value of actually the legislation. Sometimes, the legislation comes out every year and everybody looks at it and goes, oh God, here we go again. Sit in a dark room for 3 weeks and actually understand how this is going to impact things moving forward. But the outcome of this, through the kind of pain of change, is a really cool place. Because non-compliant models are making it hard for everybody. They make it hard for me, they make it hard for Dave, and they make it hard for Cam, and they make it hard for Andy doing all of this stuff. But they make it hard for the entire recruitment supply chain because not everyone's playing in a level playing field when it comes to rates that are being used or negotiations that are being done with clients. Getting everybody on that level playing field means that everyone can focus about the value that they offer and the proposition that they can bring. And it's not about anything that's being done within the smoke and mirrors, further down the supply chain. A really massive, powerful thing that comes out of this is that having a supply chain where, and I think it was really cool what Cam said actually, agencies being able to go to their clients and say, listen, I control and I understand my supply chain. I know exactly what's going through and I've got the data to be able to make me comfortable and make you comfortable, Mr. Client. Therefore, we can enter into a world and a relationship whereby we don't have to worry about risk, which means all of our energy can be focused on growth. It can be focused on opportunity. It can be focused on providing you with the best service that we possibly can. And that's a really cool place because that's where some really interesting kind of genuine innovation within the space about how we do things better, faster, stronger, smarter. So yeah, there's always some impact when things are changing, but everyone will get through that because this is the new world that we're going to be operating in. And once that new world becomes the norm, that becomes our new habit in how we're engaging with our supply chain and getting information from our supply chain, and in some instances kind of learning from our supply chain. Once we're kind of through that, the future looks really cool.
I was just trying to get my head around that because you tapped on it. It's got my brain whirling now. I was at an event yesterday and we were talking about the changes in the industry and what's driving the different changes within the industry. Do you think these types of changes and what we're seeing here in particular are going to change the sort of the structure of the industry with regards to, is this going to drive and increase more contract revenue, or is it going to reduce contract? Is it going to change? I'm just trying. What we're trying to understand is the complexity of the industry and what's really driving the different changes and what's going to come out the other side. So some of the stuff that we're seeing at the moment with all sorts of things with the way workers like to behave and how they like to structure their lives, etc. That's driving more contract than it is over perm. Uncertainty drives more contract. Do these things influence that as well, either way?
I'm not sure it changes. I was about to say I'm not sure it changes kind of supply and demand dynamics, but I think there are some elements where it may, which is connected to those things where Andy was saying about actually how does the top part of the supply chain think about de-risking that process, and do they actually, do they have a situation where they would have a preference for an agency or the agency they're working with to work with certain umbrella companies from a de-risking perspective from that side. So I think it could increase some supply and demand aspects on there. I think the interesting part will be is that once as I mentioned, like the change becomes the new norm and everyone stops the energy that is being put into this, that energy will go into other things.
Sure.
And I think that's where we'll see like the innovation around actually, when it comes to kind of candidate and contract behavior, how can we make things easier, better, faster, slicker, potentially less impactful when it comes to administration and support? So I like it's maybe it's odd for the audience to be like, God, these guys are a bit kind of nerdy. They're getting really excited about what this legislation could do. I think what we're all excited about is the world that the legislation creates.
Yeah.
Because I think that's a really cool place. And I think we could see some real kind of innovation from the whole supply chain about how they help facilitate JSL data and other things in a more enabled, more fast-paced, easier way. I just, God, it's just got this feeling over the next kind of 2-3 years, we're going to see some real kind of innovation on not the what it is, but how it's done in order to be creating like much better user experiences for the supply chain.
Yeah, and this goes back into that drive more towards consultancy work that we're seeing across the recruitment sector. We call it the pinnacle moment. We're seeing more and more recruiters going into their customers and their end user supply chains and going, let us advise on what this looks like and how to do it together and navigate it together, which can only be a good thing. Dave and Andy, I'm going to direct this question to you guys. For those people on the call who aren't taking it very seriously at the moment or are thinking this will just wash away, have you got any sort of examples of sort of horror stories that come to mind where it's gone wrong or it's blown up on people's faces or could blow up on people's faces in particular? That might just scare a couple of people on the call to get into action.
Well, we've not seen anything yet. I mean, JSL doesn't hit until, the 6th of April onwards, or for payments processed from the 6th onwards. But, and who knows how quickly we'll see HMRC start to take action, under Chapter 11. I think, like, generally, I would say a lot of the larger providers had all their ducks in a row by the end of 2025, and we're starting to see some of the SME section of the market have been taking action from January onwards. But I would say there's still some agencies that we're speaking to that really don't have any knowledge of JSL at all, and they're kind of just discovering it for the first time. And actually, with Chapter 11 applying from the 6th of April and for payments being processed from the 6th of April, those potential liabilities are already accruing. If you as an agency have got candidates out working and they're due for payment now, for March time works, for example, from the 6th of April onwards, there's potential liability already accruing there. Now, obviously, that's only relevant if you are working with non-compliant providers, and if you're working with compliant providers like us on the call, for example, and some others, then it's not so much of a concern. But yeah, I would say if you're not already taking action on it, then pick up the phone, speak to the umbrellas that you're currently working with, and you really need to start taking some action now, because we're just over a week away from the 6th of April. But I would say for the majority of cases we have seen, that the movement is happening now, definitely in full flow.
Okay, fantastic. Andy, anything from your end?
Yeah, I suppose I'd add that I was at an event earlier this week, and it was mostly end clients in the room, and there was a sort of show of hands thing with the speaker asking about what their supply chains look like. And there was a few there that didn't really know whether they had umbrellas in their supply chains, and therefore didn't know who those umbrellas were, and therefore didn't know if they were compliant, non-compliant, all the rest of it. So sort of, in terms of sort of horror stories I'm hearing is, I think it's actually a good thing in the end. But it just goes to show that there's still a little bit out there of people that haven't quite got to grips with this yet. They're going to have to do that, and everyone's going to have to sort of, sharpen up their act and get on board. And that will be a good thing. That's sort of what we're all saying, is that in the end, this is going to create a sort of good thing. I suppose that there are a couple of negative consequences. Some smaller umbrellas are perhaps struggling to convince agencies, and particularly where there's an MSP in the chain, because the MSP is, as the relevant party, is dictating its own PSL, so the agency doesn't really get a say in it. Then it goes to the small umbrellas that are sometimes being told, well, we're not going to work with you anymore. Now, they might be a completely compliant provider and actually offering a good service to those workers. So, there are some losers here through all of this as well. So while we're all saying it's all going to be great, now there are some difficulties. And just one other, just point while I've got you, you were asking Colin about what we might see changing. Just one thing that I thought I'd mention is we are anecdotally hearing that some supply chains, largely starting with the end clients, that previously took a very risk-averse approach to off-payroll working rules and sort of doing blanket bans on PSCs and things. Those supply chains are now saying, well, actually, there's this risk of liability by using an umbrella company now. So there's a risk on off-payroll too that previously we dealt with that by saying you've got to work for an umbrella. So now maybe they're going back to look at the risk profile there and thinking, could we do a more balanced, proper assessment on each role and consider whether someone could work through their own personal service company if that's what they wanted to do, which is again a good thing if that is compliantly being done, rather than just saying absolutely not under any circumstances. So little shifts like that we could see, which could lead to even more people coming back into the contingent labour market, more flexible working, could be good for the whole industry and good for economic growth.
Yeah, exactly, and that's my, I suppose, my point I was trying to make before about this whole thing is it could actually change the sort of the infrastructure or the ecosystem of how recruitment is actually functioning and everything else. Let's get to, I suppose, a little bit more practical side now to the conversation about what we therefore need to do next and what sort of happen next. Cam, I'll kick that off with you then. So obviously, what are the steps that recruitment companies need to take now? And I suppose one question I've got is who in a recruitment company should actually really own this as well? Because obviously some people in a recruitment company don't actually have someone dedicated to this.
Well, I think that you need somebody dedicated dealing with due diligence within the business. However, I think the impact of JSL it's not just legislation, it's a commercial impact. So I think it's important that everybody within the recruitment industry knows what JSL is and what impacts it can have throughout the business. And in terms of agencies, there's a lot of information out there, and I think you can follow some simple steps. As an agency, if you need to map your supply chain, so know who you're using and what sort of models they're paying your workers with.
Yeah.
You need to review your actual umbrella companies, and that's not just the onboarding process, that's the deeper and darker things. As I mentioned, credit and contracts. You're using a dusty old contract from 2012 that's not fit for use, or has this umbrella company have updated contracts that they've got in place? I think it's important to reduce and strengthen your existing PSL. There's no point having 20 umbrellas on there that you spend hours and hours trying to do the due diligence on. Reduce it, but make sure it's a strong, robust group that you've got there. I think, as I mentioned at the start, educate your teams, educate your staff in terms of what this legislation is and the impact it can have on the business. And I think in terms of going forwards, there's going to be, it doesn't necessarily have to take up a lot of time or a lot of costs, but I think maybe monthly checks from your umbrella company or quarterly checks, proving and showing that payments to HMRC are all up to date. And I think doing all those things, putting it together and having a robust due diligence process, and I'm sure, for the TRN members, anybody on this panel, we'd all be more than happy or help more than happy to help anybody if they want to put together a due diligence process. Reach out to anybody here. We'd all be happy to help. But I think putting those 4 or 5 steps in place will help ensure that the recruitment companies are kept safe.
Yeah, fantastic. Andy, you had a point.
Thanks. I know I'm dominating a bit. I will be quiet after this, I promise. But just on that, reducing the PSL...
Andy, I invite you on the panel to talk. Don't worry, it's okay.
Okay, I can do that. I can do that all day. So apologies in advance. But just in terms of this reducing the PSL thing, that is happening, and we're seeing that, and you can understand why it's happening. Just one thing I'd sort of say is just be a bit careful not to reduce it too much. There is a sort of risk of putting all your eggs in one basket a little bit too much here as well. So think about having a bit of an array on your PSL. And then just one other thing, there's this other consultation which is live right now, which is all about changing, modernising the agency regulatory framework is what it's called. It's about the conduct regs, and a lot of it is about bringing umbrella companies into the conduct regs. And one of the proposals in there that the government is making is to say, well, workers should be able to choose whatever umbrella company they want to work through, whoever it is. And of course, most people who've been involved in JSL are saying, hang on a minute, you're saying on the one hand that supply chains have to be really careful about which umbrella company they're working. And now on the other hand, you're saying, a worker can just say, I want to work with this umbrella. And of course, workers might be attracted to the kind of umbrellas that we're all saying we need to get rid of from the marketplace, which are the ones offering ridiculous take-home rates because they're non-compliant tax avoidance schemes. And so, in our response to that conversation, we're going to be making this point quite forcefully, and I'm sure many others are too. And hopefully, the government will get to the right place there. But just on the PSLs, I just thought I'd mention those two thoughts.
Yeah, no, valid point. Thank you, Andy. Dave, Cam touched on a couple of things around the sort of the legislation side. Can we just go a little bit deeper with that? Because obviously that's the bit I think that has to be really thought about and reviewed properly. If there was like a checklist, what would you sort of push people towards?
Yeah, I agree with everything that Cam said there. I think for me, I would be looking at the broader picture as well, because today we're sort of specifically talking about JSL, but you've got the umbrella regulation that Andy's just mentioned there, but you've also got the Employment Rights Act, and that's a huge piece of legislation, a generational piece of legislation that's coming into this industry. We've already seen some changes come in. We've got some more coming in on the 6th of April with the SSP changes, for example, and then we've got some more staggered things coming down the line throughout 2026 and into 2027. And I think that's what we're seeing. We're seeing agencies starting to look bigger picture. This isn't just JSL, actually. When we're picking and choosing who we want to be working with moving forwards, it's more of a strategic decision. Who can we rely on, not just in the next few months, but in the next year, 2-5 years. So yeah, that's something I would be looking at as an agency. And I think as well, just to pick up on a practical tip, for example, educate your consultants as well as an agency, because if an agency isn't already starting to centralise their PSL decision making and their ongoing due diligence, etc., we've known that some of the riskiest decisions can enter through sales teams, for example, if they've got a good relationship with a provider that maybe isn't now on the PSL, etc. So for me, I would be having a look at that if you haven't already, because risk doesn't generally tend to enter through the compliance team. It tends to be, some of those more forward-facing teams. So that would be another tip for an agency that's reviewing this at the moment.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I think I'm trying to almost like formulate in my head almost like a checklist of things everyone to take away and go, right, tick, 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 I'm going to do all these things. Colin, I'll bring you in then. So, for you personally, if you were running a recruitment organisation, what would be the sort of the first 2 or 3 things that you'll go, right, this is the stuff, these are the steps, actions I'm going to take straight away?
I would spend some time actually understanding where I was at the moment and really understanding where I am at the moment to actually understand how much movement, if any, I need to go through.
Understand where you are with what regards?
With your kind of umbrella supply chain. So it's effectively, okay, what data and information can I get? Let's go through audits and reviews. Let's just kind of amp that up a little bit. Is the organisation happy for me to send someone to their offices to go through an audit and review? It's also was a default kind of personal favourite for mine, because you'd be surprised historically over the years the amount of umbrella companies that aren't actually that open to that. Can you get inside? Can you get inside the 4 walls of that business and actually see that it's a business that is doing what it says it should be doing? And can that information be provided to you pretty much instantly, because it should be able to? Mm-hmm. Once you kind of know where you are, you can then make a decision about, is that comfortable for you or is it not comfortable for you based on what you've actually kind of learned? Is that going to be easy for you to manage moving forward? If you're currently working with 20 umbrella companies, it may not be feasible to do that first work and then to do it on an ongoing basis. So is it better to work with 12, 10, 8, whatever it may be? And I'll actually double down on what Dave said, which is communicating this throughout the business is vital. It's if you're going to be going through an element of change, the last thing you want is to be actually fighting that internal pushback within the business about why are we doing things differently. This is there potentially could be other staff within your organisation that sees this change as making their lives more difficult and what they want to do day to day. So therefore, kind of communicating that information as to why this and the fact that actually to be able to not just operate, but take advantage of future opportunities coming forward. This is I don't want to call it a badge of honor, but this is a statement that we will make to all future clients about how we will be helping them and what future clients will be requiring. So actually getting internal teams effectively kind of lined up for that. And there'll be a huge amount of business owners on listening to this, either kind of live or hearing it back. And I think my message would be running and operating a business is hard. All business is hard. It's very difficult, and everyone invests a lot of time, energy, money, passion into doing it. And then there'll be maybe some people on the call thinking, actually, I've got a future plan for my business that may involve a merger or an acquisition or an exit or whatever that may be. These are the kind of practical steps that actually enhance the valuation and the structure and the validity of your business moving forward. And these are things that are very important to do for anybody, whether they're working in the business or they are their business, to make sure that they're working inside a really robust, well-organized, forward-thinking, scalable business that is capable of taking any and every opportunity that comes in front of it.
Brilliant, thank you. Just so I know as well, do all of your organisations, do you have almost like sort of guides and checklists that you're giving out to people at the moment, like on your websites and stuff that we can share? I think it'd be quite useful maybe if we can pull those from you and then distribute that as part of this this recording today. That'd be really great, because again, the reason why we've asked you to come on the call is all four of your organisations are, we think are leading edge. So it'd be good to get that advice together, pull it together, almost like create a bit of a playbook, I suppose, a bastardised playbook in essence. I'm going to sort of bring things to a close a little bit, and as much as I don't want to finish on a negative, I am going to ask a negative question, but I'm going to put a positive slant to it as well, if that's even possible. So, and I suppose my question is, the ultimate question is going to be, what's the one mistake do you think recruiters will probably make? So we want them to avoid that. But to put a bit of a positive swing on it, I'm also going to ask the subsidy question to that, which is, what's the one mistake they're going to make, but also what's the biggest opportunity here, do you think, commercially, for a recruitment organisation to use this to their strategic advantage? And Cam, I'll kick off with you just because you're right front and centre, if that's okay, for those two questions, and I'll pass it to the other guys afterwards.
So in terms of in terms of what they need to do, what agencies have to be careful of, just look at your due diligence process. Look at it now before it's too late, where you may have something that pops up and you're working under pressure. If you proactively look at that due diligence process, you can have a robust system in place. And in terms of commercial advantage, I think because you've got that robust system in place, you can speak to your end clients, you can speak to potential clients, and you can demonstrate, not just through rhetoric, but through actual evidence, that not only do you understand, but you've also got full control of your supply chain. So don't take JSL, don't think it's a big headache, it's a big stress, or it's a problem to the industry. It's a good thing, it's a proactive thing. Just be on top of it, position yourself correctly, work closely with your umbrella companies. The ones that are compliant will be absolutely transparent, like the guys were mentioning. They'll let you come to the offices, they'll discuss things with you. So take some time out, work closely with your umbrella companies, have a good due diligence process in place, and use those as tools when you're speaking to your end clients to say, not only do I understand the process, I'm in full control of it, and here's the proof. Fantastic.
Brilliant. Thank you, Cam. And Cam, if people want to reach out to you directly, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
You can ping me an email, which is KAM@thecinchgroup.com, which is CINCH, or feel free to call the offices at any time. I'll always be available. The whole team are here to help. So if anybody from the TRN network wants any help or support in putting together a robust due diligence process, reach out to myself or, like I say, anybody in the panel, and I'm sure we'll all be happy to help.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Appreciate that, Cam. Thank you. Dave, those two questions to you then. So the mistake that they're going to make and the opportunity ahead.
Yeah, I think for me, just agree with everything Cam just said there, and Colin touched on a few key points. I think, don't treat this simply just as a tick box exercise. I think agencies have really got a fantastic opportunity to get ahead of here and use compliance as a differentiator. It's not just a cost control. We've talked about how end clients are increasingly becoming aware of risk in the supply chains and the potential reputational damage that could come their way if you're partnering with non-compliant firms. And, those end clients want confidence that their workforce models aren't going to create any liabilities in the chain or any reputational damage. So I think there's a really good opportunity to, shift away from, we're just compliant to we're actively protecting your business. And I think that's that essentially builds trust, that transparency, and ultimately transparency and trust, will win PSL spots and in turn future business. So that's how I would view it moving forwards.
Fantastic, thanks, Dave. And if people want to get in touch with you and the guys at PayStream?
So my email address is david.johnson@paystream.co.uk. And again, our details on the website. If you want to call in and ask for me, I'm happy to have a conversation.
Brilliant, thanks, Dave. Colin, over to you. Same two questions. So the mistake they're going to make and the opportunity ahead.
On the mistake side of things, again, maybe being kind of too brutally honest, is the mistake to avoid is it won't happen to me. That's the one. It won't happen to me. There are 36,433-ish recruitment agencies in the UK. They're not going to look at me. They're not going to look at me. I think that's just mistake number one. Just like it won't happen to me. The benefit of this, I think it's actually larger than the legislation. The benefit is you're going to put a massive suit of armor around your business, and people will see your supply chain, your clients see massive value in that.
Yeah. Businesses
want to engage with good, strong, robust businesses that are ultimately going to help their business grow. And proving that and justifying that, that's a good thing.
So would it be fairly canny then for an organisation, once they've got things going, to actually do marketing campaigns about what they're doing and how they're working and that type of stuff to use that?
Honestly, I would. I think it's a brilliant kind of bow to kind of add into there, because if you're able to communicate to opportunities about, this is what we're going to do for you. Mm-hmm. This is how we're going to do it for you, because it will provide you with value in time or user experience or scalability or easeability. And we safeguard you by these robust structures that ensures that any transaction that we do together is safe, secure, it's repeatable, it's scalable.
Yeah, very good. Colin, people want to get in contact with the guys at Liquid Friday?
Yeah, sure, do. Please reach out directly to the main website, or please feel free to reach out to me directly, colin.gunnell@liquidfriday.co.uk.
Fantastic, thank you. And Andy, to finish off with you, because I know you love talking. No, I'm joking.
Yeah.
But from your point, from the FCSA perspective,
I've got the hard job of giving the advice that everyone's already given, right? So I will probably be sort of repeating it. But yeah, the worst thing you can do is do nothing. That's kind of what everyone else has said. Bury your head in the sand and think, oh, this seems too difficult. Take it seriously. It's not a question of, they won't find me. If a liability arises and then you've been working with a bad umbrella company, that liability will land on you. So you really do need to do something. So that's the mistake to avoid. And then in terms of opportunity, it's like everyone else says, once you've got it all sorted out, show that off. That's a string to your bow. And who knows, maybe you can explain to your clients that, compliance, there is a cost involved in compliance, and maybe your margin needs to go up a little bit. So there's definitely an opportunity there, I think, too.
Fantastic. And likewise, Andy, if people want to find more about the FCSA and speak to you.
Yeah, email is andy.chamberlain@fcsa.org.uk.
Fantastic, absolutely superb. So Colin, Dave, Cam, Andy, I really appreciate your time today. Thank you. I know there's a lot of follow-up stuff that's going to come from this. We'll get all your the stuff that you're advising people on, we'll pull that together and get this sent out to not only people on today, and listening back to the recording, but also to the wider community and the wider sort of TRN community that we've got as well. But I think I look at everything as these changes come through as huge opportunities. It's the ones who take the opportunities to their advantage can actually do incredibly well off the back of it. So I think it's another headache, potentially, if you choose it to be a headache, but it could also be an absolute a goldmine for you as well. Really appreciate your time today. Thanks very much for joining us. Thank you for those who have been listening in today. And listen to the recording session of that. Do reach out to Colin, Dave, Cam, and Andy at your leisure. Speak to them. Get on top of this now while you can, and then make sure we're using this to our advantage. Otherwise, have a fantastic rest of the day. Thanks for your time, and look forward to catching up again. Thanks, everyone. Take care.